All right, so that is gonna bring us to the white cards, starting with commons and starting with cheap cards. We've got Jump Scare up first. This is a single white mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+2, gains flying, and becomes a horror enchantment creature in addition to its other types. Flavor text here is boo. Really great, but really, really efficient combat trick.
Yeah, notably, I don't think the creature type or subtype, like the horror enchantment, I don't think that matters maybe at all. Like there might be one rare or mythic that I missed that cares about it. So it's basically just +2/+2 and flying for 1 mana. Which I mean, we've seen it cost 2 mana in the past and be like fine. We've seen it cost 2 mana but have Convoke and March of the Machines, and that card was amazing. I think this card is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like somewhere. It's not. I've seen the comparison of the Marching Machines card you mentioned, Aerial Boost. I think it was called. That one had Convoke, and that one was quote unquote free a lot of the time, which really made it busted. And I do think this
Yes.
card is worse than that, but not by a lot. Like just that the efficiency of +2/+2, sending a 4 power creature to the sky, dealing 6 at the end of the game, like that's going to be really relevant. Heck, sometimes, not going to happen often, but sometimes you're going to jump your survival creature just to make sure it does get in. And you're like, yep, I trigger my survival. Actually, I said not going to happen a lot, but there are some survival triggers that are just worth a card. So
Yes.
that is something I actually think might come up more than I just implied it would. But yeah, it's a really good trick, and tricks, generally the efficient tricks tend to be a little bit underrated in the early days of the format. I'm going to give Jump Scare a C+.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning with survival, there's also the flip side where you don't cast it pre-combat and your opponent is like heavily incentivized to block, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of like ninjutsu in that sense where if they let it get through this turn, it might just snowball and get worse. Like things could just
Yeah.
get out of control. So you can just often, use this as 1 mana. Okay, guaranteed trade, you're blocking. Get out of the way for me. That being said, I'm still going to join you at C+. I don't think it goes into the B range.
Yep. Sounds good to me. Next up, we've got Possessed Goat. This is a funny card. Single white mana for a 1/1. And it's got the ability 3 and discard a card. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on Possessed Goat. It becomes a black demon in addition to its other types and colors, but activate only once. So we've got like a 1/1 that will get in, not on turn 2, but on turn 3, you've got that threat of activation. Opponent doesn't really want to block. And also like a discard outlet for Delirium, Reanimator, whatever you'd want to discard to. Strange card. Not like we have a lot of analogs to this one.
Yeah, I think the rate on this is bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
discarding a card is a real cost.
Oh, yeah.
So the only time you're playing this, I think, is if you're turning that into an upside, right? Like reanimating.
Yeah, sorry. I kind of mentioned like, oh, it's a 1/1 and it can attack and threat of activation. It's not just generically going to be a white aggro card. I don't think. I could see it, but right now I don't think so.
Yeah, I like if the demons are supposed to have flying. If this thing was flying, it'd be great. But just being like a 4/4 ground goat creature, yeah, only interested in this in black white. I'm gonna give it a D plus.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Cool. Next up, we've got Acrobatic Cheerleader. This is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human survivor, and it has survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, just to read this out one more time, if Acrobatic Cheerleader is tapped, put a flying counter on it, but this ability triggers only once. You can't have 3 flying counters on it. Boohoo. Yeah, cool little card. Play a little mini game, get a slightly above rate creature, 2/2 flyer.
Yeah, this card's fine. Like again, some of these survival cards we said being on the play is going to be big because if you can trigger this kind of for free, it's quite good. And if you're on the draw and looking at a 3-drop when you're attacking with this, it's not going to be that great.
Yeah, I think that this is mechanic survival is. Like, there's often a mechanic somewhere in the set these days that really makes me say something I would normally say, but really makes me say because of these mechanics, like just make sure you have a 2 mana play, and you don't want to not have a 2 mana play when your opponent plays this card on turn 2 or any of the survival cards. It's still just like a C. It's like a very C, but I'll give Acrobatic Cheerleader C.
Yep, C for cheerleader.
Sweet. Fear of Surveillance. This is 1 and a white for a 2/2 enchantment creature. It's It's got vigilance, and when it attacks, you surveil one.
Yeah, it's got types.
Types.
I already like it more.
Types. This is a nice card to enable your delirium for multiple reasons, surveilling and enchantment creature.
It's probably a C+.
I was just saying it. Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's like, I kind of wanted to give it a C, but yeah, you're right. I think the enchantment creature, like we've been saying, kind of bumps it up. Yeah.
Also, like Surveil 1, even if you just trigger that once, it's
pretty good.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, my gut wants to give it a C. Actually, I'm gonna stick with the C. I do agree with all the enchantment or types mattering stuff, but I think it's just still like slightly too vanilla. Yeah. Okay, I'll stick with my C. All right. Next up, we've got Cult Healer. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 3/3. It's got Eerie. We haven't seen Eerie in a while, so I'll read this out. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, which means both sides on the battlefield, Cult Healer gains lifelink until end of turn. So you get a 3/3, sometimes lifelink.
Yes, this is one, like some Eerie triggers, you can either do like multiple in one turn and then skip a turn and kind of have it all wash out to the same. This one you want to do like, exactly once per turn. There are a couple of, well, at least one way to do this at instant speed, which is nice. So you can potentially do it on blocks. But most of the time it's going to need to have an attack for lifelink, and your opponent is going to know about it, right? Because you're going to have to tap out for your enchantment to trigger this pre-combat.
Yeah, it being a white 3 mana 3/3 just really makes me think Thistledown players from Bloomborough. It's like it's a 3 mana 3/3 with like doing the sets thing. I do think this is slightly better than that, though. I think at least no, maybe not slightly better, but more generically good. Like I think most white decks will just be able to trigger this, whereas like your Thistledown players really want it to be in a Valiant deck. So I still, I mean, this one's between like a C and a C minus. I probably would give it a C minus though.
Yeah, I wrote C minus for myself too. Okay. Notably, the 3 power is potentially like a downside in red white too.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Huh? Didn't even think about that. All right, what's up next?
Next we have Hardened Escort, 2 and a white for a 2/4. When it attacks, another creature you control gets +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn.
I think this card's pretty good.
Yeah, you want your stuff to survive? This will help you survive.
This helps you survive. Yeah, I'm forgetting about synergies, survival synergies. It's effectively a 3-power creature that attacks better than a 3/3 because it has 4 toughness, and lets your 2-drop get in. This is, I think, just a rock solid 3-drop. I'm gonna give it a C, but I think in some decks it's gonna be even a little bit better than that if you have like a keyworded 2-drop or something. Sweet.
I agree. I'm totally with you there.
Living Phone. This is an interesting card. 2 and a white for a 2/1 artifact creature. When it dies, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You can reveal a creature card with power 2 or less from among them, put into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
So this kind of doesn't have a home, right?
Yeah, it's not like a red-white aggro card. It's not, like, it's a decent thing to sacrifice, but not red or black.
Notably with this set, I think I'll mention this now. I've been thinking of a time to say this.
Yeah.
In most sets, ETBs are like purely upside. You want as many things to have ETBs as possible. In this set, though, death triggers can potentially be better than ETB triggers if you're doing a lot of Manifest Dread. Because if you manifest something with an ETB, you don't get the benefit, but you can still flip it up and have the death trigger happen. And your opponent won't know that they're like attacking into something with the death triggers. Because there are quite a few death triggers in the set.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I want to make the point. I kind of feel like it's wasted on this card because I still think this card is bad, but worth mentioning that I'm still going to give this like a D.
So is this like a black-white card where it's tough because like black-white...
And what are you saying? Like, it's not... If it dies draw a card, it would be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it's got this deck building restriction.
Like
Super
what was that
strange card.
Spore Frog thing from like the 3/2 that died draw card? It wasn't even that good.
Sorry, which one?
This is like there was like what was it in Val, like a 3/2 green common that died and drew a card.
Oh, yes, yes, the spore or something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Spore Frog, something like that. It wasn't even that good, and this is like smaller and more restrictive. Like yeah,
Yeah, I
I don't
keep
see it.
reading
I'm on a
it.
D.
I keep reading it and being like, it has to be a little bit better than I think, but I don't think so. Like, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out where I would want to play it, and I just don't think there's a place. So, do I want to give this a D?
Yeah, I gave it a D. Like it has types, great, but doesn't really matter for white, and like it can literally miss
Yeah, I
too.
can just miss.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, D to living phone. Trapped in the Screen is up next. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. It's got Ward 2. When it enters, exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls until Trapped in the Screen leaves the battlefield. So enchantment based
Yeah.
removal spell, O-ring. That Ward 2 is kind of nice. There's a decent amount of incidental enchantment artifact hate in this set.
Triggers Eerie as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I do kind of get the feeling that there will be a lot of haymakers in this set. Like I think this is going to be a set where removal and counter spells perform well.
Do you mean
So
like at the rare level generally, or do you think even the commons and uncommons are you thinking?
I think even the commons are going to encourage people to play like one archetype is literally Reanimator,
Right.
and you sure want to have a removal spell when your opponent reanimates their massive game winner.
I see, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, one thing that I've definitely felt in the play booster era has been, one thing that I've kind of said in past years is, some decks and some formats are just kind of fine not having removal. An aggressive deck, of course, is a little bit more okay having 1 to 2 removal spells, maybe subbing in some combat tricks. I don't feel like that's been true for the play booster era. Every set this year I've been like, yeah, you want 4 or 5 removal spells for all the reasons you just listed. So, yeah, I would imagine the same goes for Trapped in the Screen. Just a pretty solid card. Banishing Lights from the last set ended up being a little bit underwhelming, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, but it was still always just fine if you needed some, just to up your creature count, or sorry, removal count. So I'm going to give Trapped in the Screen a C+. Maybe B- range just because it is an enchantment and you care about that. So I don't know if you feel one way on one side of the coin or the other.
yeah, I wrote down B minus for myself,
Yep.
and we did talk down Banishing Light in Bloomborough because like the whole set was about like tiny creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there was so many small creature types. This set's kind of the opposite. Like you got all these land cyclers, you got these reanimation things, you've got like you know stuff the eerie triggers. I think this is a B minus.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially just getting the creature not going to the graveyard is going to matter sometime too. Okay, B
Yes, because
minus.
you're not letting them trigger delirium too.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. B minus for Trapped in the Screen. Next up, Friendly Ghost. This is 3 and a white for a 2/4 flyer. And when it enters, target creature gets +2/+4 until end turn. That's a big boost.
We got Tree Guard Duo returns.
Yeah, it really, yeah. The vigilance gone, adding flying. It's a nice one, I think. Like, I am not a huge fan of low power 4-mana flyers, but this one's got an enter the battlefield effect, and that makes up for it almost entirely.
Yeah, like this. So, do you like this better or worse than Hardened Escort for enabling survival?
Sorry, which one was that again?
The 2/4 that gives something indestructible.
Oh, I think the escort most likely, just because it is cheaper. Like, I'm gonna give a big nod to the cheaper card, but I don't think this scales poorly. Like, I think for the additional mana, I think you're getting your mana's worth, basically.
Yeah, see, I'm not so sure. Like, I know we finished the escorts are maybe it's worth mentioning really good in multiples because if you have 2 of them, they can give each other indestructible.
Mm-hmm.
But this triggering like right away, like the ETB on this and leaving back something that can't be ignored. I like this thing.
2-power creature for the Boros decks too, like a 2-power expensive creature that still has impact.
I think like we gave escort, we both did a C, right? Yeah,
Yeah, you know what?
I think this is a C plus.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you frame it like that, like I was gonna give this a C plus too. So yeah, no, I guess I do like this card a little bit better then. So yeah, C plus for Friendly Ghost, really cool card. I like one thing that I think they've done a good job of, and I was really hoping last year that they would, is they really made sure that your 4 mana plus cards like have that oomph that they need, a good ETB effect or at least ward, and I think they've done a good job of that.
They
Next up,
clearly listen to your podcasts.
yeah, exactly. There we go. Next up, Unsettling Twins. This is a 3 and a white 2/2. When it enters, you manifest dread. Wow. Speaking of 4 mana things that go into the battlefield effects.
Yeah, you set yourself up for this
Yep.
one. Beautiful.
Card is great.
This card is so good.
Yeah. So we like creatures that bring multiple creatures. We like manifest dread. We like our power and toughness equaling our mana costs. Like what does this not give us? It's just fantastic.
Yeah, this thing is like somewhere between B minus and a B.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna give it a B. I think just the solid B, because the manifest dread has such, so many good things to say about it that we've already said.
I think, funnily enough, I think I'm going to go B minus on this, just because out of all the colors, white cares about manifesting the least. It's
Yeah.
obviously great if you can with Reanimator, but
Mm-hmm.
the Delirium doesn't really matter. It's not triggering Eerie.
It's true, but I think, you pair it with green, you pair it with black. Like I think no matter what other color you pair it with, it's still gonna be pretty good. Maybe.
Yeah, it's still really good with red too. It's
Yeah.
two power creatures with red.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll come back up to B.
All right, nice. Yeah, very, very good card. We got Emerge from the Cocoon up next. This is 4 and a white for a sorcery. Return target creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. You gain 3 life.
Yeah, perfect card that only goes in pretty much one deck, and is a really good card in that deck.
Yeah.
Excellent design.
Yep, exactly. It's gonna be a bit of a litmus test, certainly when you're drafting. Like you start sort of white blackish. Maybe you pick up one of the signposts and commons in the middle of the pack. You see this card maybe in that same pack or a little bit before. If it doesn't come back around, that gives you a pretty good idea that somebody else wants to try this out, and maybe be aware of that. But yeah, I think for the black-white deck, I would give this a C+.
Yeah, I agree with that. We could give it a build around or synergy grade, but I think it's pretty obvious. So
Yep.
C+ is fine. Yep.
Fear of Immobility is up next. This is 4 and a white for a 4/4 enchantment creature. When it enters, tap up to 1 target creature. If an opponent controls that creature, you put a stun counter on it. So lock down their thing for a turn or enable your survival, basically.
Yeah, so I feel like the last few cards, you really see what the vision was with play boosters,
Mm-hmm.
where you have cards that are kind of fine but not great on their own, and then in one archetype you're like, okay, I get it, it goes in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way, if you end up playing this in the wrong type of deck, it's not going to be terrible, but really shines in its actual deck, which I'm assuming for this is going to be blue white, and to the lesser extent green white, because this is an enchantment creature that pushes damage. It's pretty strong for an Eerie trigger.
I almost think it's a little bit better than that, honestly, because 4 mana 4/4 lockdown a thing for a turn. That's just pretty good, right?
Yeah,
And,
Bergstrom.
yeah, it's Burger Strider, exactly, and it's got the 2 upsides of being an enchantment and tapping your own stuff sometimes. I mean, I don't want to sell that too much. You're not going to do that very often, I don't think. But yeah, I'm going to give Fear of Mobility a C, but that's a high grade for a 5-drop.
Okay, yeah, no, I was already on C.
Okay,
I'm
great,
with you.
great. Yeah, nice. All right, next up we've got a room, white's common room. So one side is grand entryway, 1 and a white for the ability. When you unlock this room, you make a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token. And then Elegant Rotunda is 3 and a white. It says whenever you unlock this door, or when you unlock this door, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures.
2 and a white for the Rotunda.
Sorry, 2 and a white, my bad.
Yeah, this is kind of the example I said where the adventure is either side of this is a very underwhelming card.
Mm-hmm.
A 2 mana 1/1, you're not going to do that. 3 mana, sorcery, 2+1 counters. Definitely not going to do that. You put these together, I think this card is actually really good.
Me too. Yeah, I'm a fan of this. Also, this is a enchantment that makes an enchantment. Or sorry, a room, I should say, that makes an enchantment, right? Which, I mean, rooms are enchantment. But my point being here, when you cast Grand Entryway, or if you unlock it, you're going to get 2 Eerie triggers, which is kind of sweet.
Yeah, so this card represents 3 Eerie triggers.
Yes,
basically.
exactly, which is an important part of it. And yeah, I do think that the rate on this is, it is a little bit like a 1/1 that puts 2 counters on something. You're not getting 5 mana worth of value, but all the other little pieces, being enchantment, being 3 Eerie triggers, doing it in in segments, in installments, I think that balances out to be a pretty good card.
If there's anything we learned from Bloomborough, it's that Carrot Cake was better than expected.
Yeah, I mean, Carrot Cake gave you a lot of things that this card doesn't, to be fair. But what do you
I
want
don't
to give
think
it?
it's that dissimilar, honestly.
I think that the scrying on Carrot, not to get too deep on Carrot Cake, but I think the scry on Carrot Cake was a huge deal.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
All right.
We'll not get too sidetracked.
Yeah,
but
what do you want to give this card?
I want to give this somewhere between C plus and B minus, and
Oh,
it
okay.
might even make the B minus range, maybe.
Yeah, I actually was gonna go like C on this. I'm a little bit lower. Like, I like the card, but I'm a little bit lower on it, I think.
Okay, in that case, I'll stick with my C plus.
Okay,
But I'm
yeah.
not confident enough on the B grade for this.
Okay, well, we'll see. I also, I of course respect your instinct here, and so I wouldn't be surprised if you're a little more right than I am. As
But
much as I was
there's
talking up all the parts equaling more than its whole, I still think it's like slightly below rate on a little bit too many axes.
there are just a lot of cards where if you like turn 5 triple Eerie trigger, and one of those triggers is a personal encounter on like something that wants the triggers,
Mm-hmm.
it just leads to like this crazy turn.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, this could be a very good 5. Okay, yeah, I think we don't want to spend too long on this one specifically, but definitely one to keep an eye on, because I could see this going either way from the C I gave it. Next up is Seize from Slumber. This is 4 and a white for an instant. Destroy target creature, but it costs 3 less if you target a tapped creature.
Black white bread and butter.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this is the exact kind of card you were talking about, where the defensive white cards are going to go to the black-white player. Ideally, like, in the early weeks of the format, I think actually a little bit less so, because generally, from what I've observed, the Magic community, arena players maybe particularly, aren't as picky about not putting this kind of card in their aggro deck as I would be. Like, it's kind of like, oh, it's removal. But really, you don't want a 5-mana removal spell that much in your aggro deck, and also you don't want to deal with just tapped creatures in your aggro deck. So, maybe for the first few weeks it might not be that. But like you said, exactly what you want a black-white.
Yeah, I want to give Seize from Slumber a C.
Yep, that's where I was going to go too. C for Seize for Slumber. Next up is Shepherding Spirits. This is 4 white for a 4/5 flyer, but it's got Plane Cycling for 2 mana. So this is the way to get a large-ish creature into the graveyard for reanimating. Notably, not a great, super impressive thing to reanimate, but I guess on turn 4 it's not that bad.
Okay, so I think the land cyclers are all going to be more played than we expect. Partly, like, they're not a great way to trigger delirium, but they do that, right? It is a creature that going to the graveyard, which probably isn't going to be the one you're missing,
Yeah.
but still going to help. It is something you can reanimate, as you said, which it's not going to be your priority target, but it also is the exact kind of thing you just want to include in your deck for Manifest Dread.
That's true. Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
Because if you are just at the point where you get like 2 land cyclers and cut like 1 land from your deck, and all of a sudden you have 2 more hits where you just randomly have this like massive thing that can flip up and eat creatures that your opponent's not expecting, I think there's a lot of power to that.
Or just like, your opponent's kind of just planning out the cadence of how the next few combats are going to go, and you're just trying to figure, okay, like I swing here, they swing me back. Like, they might just not be expecting, like, they leave back a creature, playing to block, and you go for your face. You know, like they just won't have calculated that, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give my. I've been asking you a lot of what would you give first, so I'll give my grade first on this. I think it's still just a C. Would you disagree? Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm with you on C.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
but I think that this would have been much lower, like in a lot of recent sets.
I love. Yeah, somebody in chat goes, "Oh, it's secretly just Galewind Moose." That's a funny comparison. Next up, we're going to the uncommons here. Ethereal Armor. This is a reprint. This is a single mana for an aura. When it enters the battle, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. So on its own, it's going to give +1/+1 at first strike, which is a pretty meaningful boost for 1 mana, and really, really can get out of range quickly with any amount of enchantments on the battlefield.
Yeah, like you're setting yourself up for a 2-for-1 because there's no protection or card advantage built in here. But this thing is going to hit really hard.
Real hard, yeah. Put it on a lifelinker, put it on any flyer. Like, this is the kind of thing where when you're balancing is the risk worth the reward on an aura that doesn't give you value? Ask yourself generally, if they remove it the turn after I cast it, like they untap and cast a removal spell, how happy am I going to be? And I think you're going to be pretty happy still, because this is going to push a ton of damage on a flyer, make them chump, do whatever.
I still don't I do think there's going to be a lot of removal played in this format, and you can't cast this into open mana. Like, there's still downsides with it.
Certainly.
I was going to go, I think, to like a B-.
I was going to go C+, actually, even a little bit lower.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's interesting to me. I'm also assuming that this is going to be mostly played in blue-white.
I think so, too. Yeah, it is not... I don't think your red-white decks or your green-white decks are going to have... So maybe it's actually just a synergy card. Maybe I'll come up on B- with the synergy qualifier, because I think most other decks just don't have the density to get to that big hit I was talking about. Sound about right? Or are you more, I'm kind of fine playing this in any deck, you think?
Well, no, it's definitely going to be deck dependent. Like, you're not going to play this in every deck, but like, yeah, I almost feel if I'm giving it a synergy grade, I want to go closer to what the ceiling of this would be, which I think is even higher. If that makes sense?
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, I'll leave it at a B-. You can leave it as a synergy B-, but I do think there's a real high ceiling on this card.
Yeah, that's totally fine with me. Next up is Optimistic Scavenger, a kind of a nerfed version of a card we've seen before. So this is a single white mana for a 1/1. It's got Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Sorry, I completely misread this card the first time I saw it. It's not a nerf version. It's a little bit better than the card I was thinking of. So I was thinking of Pious Wayfarer. That just gave +1/+1 on a turn. This card's great. I don't usually do this, going, oh wow, I completely misread this card during this before this art review, but I did it with this card. Yeah, so this card seems very, very strong to me. Forget about anything I was about to say.
It's just like a better Generous Visitor.
Yeah. Wow. Whew. This card's great.
Oh yeah, this card's like a B+.
Yeah. Optimistic Scavenger is really, really strong. I think that's all we have to say about it. B+?
Yeah, I think it's more blue-white, but in blue-white, I think it's a B+.
Yep. Yeah, and this is a really nice one with the white room, the white common room we went over that gives you potentially three Eerie triggers.
Right. Well, so okay, just imagine that curve. You play this on turn 1. Turn 2, you play the room that makes a 1/1, and this becomes a 2/2. And sorry, a 3/3, because you get 2 triggers, one for the room and one for the 1/1. You're attacking for 3 on turn 2. Turn 4, you get to add 3 more counters because of the trigger plus the 2 triggers.
Yeah.
So you're attacking for 7. You're attacking for 3 on turn 2. You're attacking for 7 on turn 3 with a common and an uncommon.
Yeah, I might be coming up to where your grade was in that white card on that right room.
Yeah, this card is ridiculous. This is like a lightning rod and a half. It's must kill instantly.
Yep, must kill. Okay, let's go to our next card. This is Shard Mage's Rescue. Single white mana for an aura with flash. Enchant creature you control. As long as Shard Mage's Rescue entered the battlefield this turn, enchanted creature has hexproof, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1. So wow, this card is so many things. Like, this is Snakeskin Veil, but an
With upside.
enchantment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also triggers your Eerie. A Snakeskin Veil that triggers Eerie and just helps everything. Yes.
really good, really good. You want to give us a B?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, great spell. Next up, we've got Unwanted Remake, maybe an apt name here. A single white mana for an instant. Destroy target creature. Its controller manifests Dread.
Yeah, so this is one. Manifesting Dread is something you never want to let your opponent do. It is slightly more interesting that if you might want to target your own creatures in response to removal, but that still doesn't make it playable. Like, I almost want to give this a sideboard grade because the reanimation deck exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think if it's not sideboard grade, I would give this an F.
Right. So generally, when you have this kind of card, the downgrade into a 1/1 or this is definitely better than a 1/1 into something else, it matters how how much better that thing you're killing is than whatever you're downgrading it into. So I'm just saying this, by the way, for folks that might look at this card and be like, wow, 1 mana removal, that's really good. Anytime you give your opponent anything, I'm saying this also because a lot of times the YouTube comments do talk about this kind of card in particular. Parting Gust from the last set was a good example, where I think a lot of people underrate just how bad giving your opponent something is. It's really bad, even though it's super efficient. More of a constructed thing that comes up from time to time. Anyways, with that out of the way, I agree. Sideboard card sounds about right to me.
Good.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Veteran Survivor. It's a single white mana for a 2/1. A lot of 1 mana cards in white. The survival here says, if it's tapped on your second main phase, exile up to 1 target creature from a graveyard. As long as there are 3 or more cards exiled with Veteran Survivor, it gets +3/+3 and has hexproof. It's a big buff.
It's a big buff, but that's a lot of work.
It's a dream. Yeah. So
yeah, I'm not a big fan of this thing.
Yeah, this is okay. Like, it's a 1 mana 2/1, and that has the potential to snowball. Like, that's when you say not a big fan, you're just out on the card, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not super into a 1 mana 2/1 in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't, like, blue white doesn't really want this, I don't think. White red probably does, but like, I don't think the white green deck is, it's just so small. Like, it's gonna be good on turn 1, but it's pretty low impact.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, that even though you're not getting the 3 cards on this almost ever, you do care about just exiling a card from the opponent's grave sometimes, right? Whether that be Delirium, or maybe they do pitch their reanimation target early, or mill it. Like, I think just exiling 1 card into this trading, you're going to be happy with that sometimes.
Well, if it trades, you don't get the card.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yes, that's right. Of course. Yeah, of course. Oh, sorry. Let me... I was thinking, like, when it trades the next turn, basically. Like, you get an attack, you're not getting to that 3rd one, of course, but if it trades later, like, you were fine exiling their artifact or whatever.
But you're also, like, you're not hitting something from your graveyard on turn 2 when you attack with this.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm probably a little bit higher on this card than I should have been coming in.
I was going to give this a C-.
Yeah, I was going to give it a C+, but maybe I'll split the difference and just land on a C here.
It's up to you. We can have another two grade difference.
Yeah, we could. You know what? Let's do it. I'll stick with my original C+, but we'll be happy to be wrong here. Next up is Exercise. 1 and a white for a sorcery. Exile target artifact, enchantment, or creature power 4 or greater. Decent amount of coverage on this one.
And that word exile is especially important in this set.
It's big.
Yeah, I like this thing. This looks more like a C+ to me.
Yeah, well, I was going to give it a C+ too.
Okay.
I think that, this just very hard to imagine this rotting in your hand, which is the reason these are kind of sometimes not great. Orphans of the Wheat. I love this name so much. The way I put it on Twitter is like, it's the, you go to Spirit Halloween and they have to have a legally distinct name for the costume. Like, I saw, Beetlejuice is like Juicy Demon or something. Orphans of the Wheat is just such the perfect example of that. Children of the Corn, for those not familiar. So this is 1 and a white for a 2/1. When it attacks, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. Orphans of the Wheat gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you tap this way.
So I actually kind of like this card.
Oh yeah, me too.
Okay.
I think it's pretty good.
This is a really good way at turning on survival because you can like curve this into your survival creature and have it immediately trigger,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really nice upside. And then this is kind of like giving all of your other creatures exalted.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Like it does tap you out of blockers, right? Like
Right.
you're tapping your whole board, and there's some games you won't be able to do that. Um, but yeah, like there's even we're about to see there's a 4 mana white thing that survival returns a creature with mana value 3 or less to your hand, so you can just like freely tap that, attack with this. If it trades, you bring it back again. Like there's some cool stuff you can do with this.
There's also, I mentioned this card a few minutes ago, or probably half an hour ago at this point, but there is that red creature that makes 2 power creatures unblockable. So you can
Hmm.
just, dome them for 6 or whatever. Yeah, I think just a
Yep.
lot of little things that are good about this card. I would give it a C+. I don't know if you want to go in the B range, but
No. C plus is more than fine for me.
yeah, sounds good. Next up, we've got Sheltered by Ghosts. This is 1 and a white for an aura. Enchant creature you control. When Sheltered by Ghost enters, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Sheltered by Ghost leaves the battlefield. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has lifelink and ward 2. The amount of ways this card is pushed is ridiculous. So you're getting 2 mana, exile something. A non-land permanent is the first way they pushed it, not just creature. And then it gets 3 good abilities.
How would you feel? Okay, there's going to be some interesting mind games about this because if your opponent manifests dread
Mm-hmm.
and puts a land in the graveyard, there's a chance that they have, a land under there and you can just get it and like kind of permanently deal with the creature. But if it happens to be something huge and then your thing dies, you're in big trouble.
That is kind of funny, yeah. I guess it depends partially what your opponent put in the graveyard, right? Like if they put a creature in the graveyard, it's not a land under there for sure. Which, by the way, actually one thing I would point out, this might be getting a little bit deep for a set review, but I do think it's important with Manifest Dread, like know what the opponent puts in the graveyard, because that gives you a bit of information of their game plan. But yeah, that is a little interesting mind game. I think probably like whenever you have a card like this, you do try to hit tokens or hit something that's not good, or does something with counters on it. Let's just say +1/+1 counters, so that if they do bring it back, it's not gonna be as bad as it was before. I think hitting a manifest creature is gonna be pretty good most of the time, though. Yeah.
There's also like this card is just really interesting because there's also interesting decision points as to what you put this on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because this card can play in a lot of ways. Like you can, giving it doesn't give any combat defense, right? Like there's no toughness, there's no
Right.
first strike, there's no, you know, evasion even. So brawling with this is not going to be that appealing when you only have +1/+0 lifelink and ward. So you can potentially put this on your big creature to keep it out of the range of like burn spells, especially with the ward 2. But I think there'll be a lot of spots when you might want to put this on your smallest creature.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is something.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say just to diversify your threats a little bit. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I even think there will be spots where you use this just as a one turn, like push damage thing.
Right. Yeah. No. I agree with that too, for sure. I think
So
that's
like,
like a big part of this card.
yeah, so if they have like a bunch of 2/2s and like one bigger creature, you can put this on one of your like 1/1s, get rid of the big creature, get your attack in, have the creatures, trade, gain your life, and
Mm-hmm.
but if you've like pushed enough damage from that, like there's a lot of interesting applications with this.
Yeah. So interesting card, powerful card, has a lot of. I think it's going to be a very skill intensive card in a lot of ways. What should you give it?
That's tough. I think it's somewhere in the B range.
Yes, I
I
agree.
could see it going anywhere from B plus to B minus. Like after you get the first hit in where you surprise them, you probably can like never get this creature into combat again if it's like a removal spell for you.
Hmm.
I think it's maybe a B minus.
I think so too. Yeah, this is one that, as you know, before we hopped on and I was going through the cards, I kind of went back and forth a bunch between those. But I do think that, like, all those small downsides you don't really think about, like you just said, like after you get that surprise hit in, it's kind of going to be a creature with no extra combat bonus, kind of just going to sit there. Yeah, I'm going to go B minus. It's a very strong card, but there are situations where it's not going to live up to what you expect it to do. Next up is Split Skin Doll. Really gross art. 1 and a white for a 2/1 artifact creature. When it enters, draw a card, then discard a card unless you control another creature power 2 or less. Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, Reanimator, this is an excellent discard outlet, and then later on, it just draws you a card.
Yeah. Nothing to dislike about this card, really.
Yeah, this card's really good.
Yeah. I would give Split Skin Doll a B.
Yep, I'm with you.
Great. Glimmer Seeker is up next. 2 and a white for a 3/3. It's got survival, and the survival ability says draw a card if you control a glimmer creature. So again, some of those creatures being that creature type mattering a little bit. And if you don't control a glimmer creature, you make a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token.
Yeah, so now we're starting to get somewhere. As you said, sometimes these survival cards are worth a card's worth,
Mm-hmm.
and this one definitely can be, and it's decently statted for a
Mhm.
3-drop. I think this card's decent.
Yeah, me too. I think this is probably going to be a card that your opponent wants to kill pretty badly and wants to trade with pretty badly. Like, you still, with all these survival cards, you still need to, you read the text, it looks very appealing. When you think about how it plays out, it's a little bit less appealing, and that's why they kind of juice some of these. So I think it's good but not amazing, because it's just not going to get in multiple times or be able to get in once sometimes. So I give it a C plus. It's got some high upside, but
I already wrote down C plus for myself too.
nice. We're very in line today. Okay, so this next one here, this is one of the ones that you alluded to. Patched
Yeah.
Plaything. 2 and a white for a 4/3 double strike. And it says Patched Plaything enters the battlefield with 2 -1/-1 counters on it if you cast it from your hand. It's also an artifact creature, for what it's worth.
Yes, you did remind me. I did say I'd bring it up more often, but the last card was also an excellent thing to manifest.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, actually, that's a good point in general. Just survival creatures are good to manifest. I don't think we didn't call that out just yet.
I did
Oh,
mention
sorry,
it when I
you
did
did. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so Patch Plaything, another good thing to manifest.
Yeah, this one's amazing to manifest. Like if you just flip this on, if you manifest Dread on turn 2 and then just flip this,
Mhm.
the game might just be over.
Yeah, just ate them.
Yeah.
And then if they don't have a removal spell, they either have to chump or make some really awkward blocks or risky blocks at the very least.
It's not even that bad to reanimate. Like
It's also
it's
just
not what you want to spend your reanimation card on because you want to get something like you're really good with continuous value. But a 4/3 double strike is massive.
well, it's also just like fine on its own. Like we were talking about all these, like, oh, if you do that, like a 3-mana 2/1 double strike is not that bad, right? Like that's just a fine card to cast.
There's like even the white common room adds counters. There's an uncommon that adds counters. There's combat tricks. There's imagine putting ethereal armor on this. Like
Oh.
there's
There's
this
also
is also another great target for the exile thing we just saw.
Shelter by Ghost. Yeah, I was thinking that too. There's
Yeah.
also the we haven't gotten to it yet. We might get to it in the next card or two. But there's a room that one of the doors is reanimate a 3-cost or cheaper creature. So
Yep.
little thing
And
there
then you
too.
get 4/3 double strike. Yep.
Also, there used to be a rule in design, already designed, where they didn't have +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters in the same set because it's a little bit confusing rules wise. But if you haven't encountered this, they actually cross out. So if you put a +1/+1 counter on this thing, you'll remove a -1/-1 counter. That's what happens. Okay.
Yeah, which doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things for
Yeah.
this set, but
It's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, what do you
Yeah.
want to give this? We didn't grade it. I just realized.
I do want to give this a B minus.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think so too. Good to cast on its own and has some really, really high upside. Next up is Savior of the Small. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4. It's got a survival ability that says if it's tapped during your second main phase, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. I was gonna say, oh, combo, no, to your hand.
Well, this is the card I mentioned with Orphans of the Wheat, right? Where you can just pump your Orphans, attack with your 3/2 or 4/3 or 5/4, however much you pump it. And then they either take a bunch of damage or they trade with it and you bring it back to your hand right away.
Yeah, I was praising them for the 4+ mana cards having a lot of oomph and enter the battlefield effect or ward or something. This one doesn't have that. It can if you do trigger it immediately, like you just said. But I don't think this card is something I'm very excited about.
Another good one to manifest Dread.
Yeah, it's true, but that means you have to put this card in your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so how low are you on this? Because I was still going to give this a C-.
I was going to give it a D+, so we're not that far off, but I am, I think, notably lower.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, Lionheart Glimmer. 3 white for an enchantment creature. It's a Glimmer, of course. It's a 2/5. It's got Ward 2, and it says whenever you attack, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. That's just straight up whenever you attack. It doesn't have to be with this.
So, yes. Yeah. So I said there wasn't rewards for going wide. This is one of them. Like if you curve the Boros uncommon that makes 3 Gremlins into this, that's a pretty good turn 5.
Yeah, this thing's
also
pretty tough to deal with too. Like 5 toughness Ward 2.
Yep.
That's beefy, and it does have an immediate impact on the board, on your attacking board.
It attacks as a 3/6. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this card is solid. Nothing I'm super excited about, but I don't think, I think this gets the C+. I don't think I would cut this from any decks kind of card.
You are giving it a C+?
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote down C, and I think I'll stay there.
Yeah, that's fair. Next up is Fear of Abduction. This is 4 white for a enchantment creature. It's a 5/5 flyer. And it says an additional cost to cast this spell, exile a creature you control. When Fear of Abduction enters, exile target creature an opponent controls. And when Fear of Abduction leaves the battlefield, put each card exiled with it into its owner's hand. Cool card.
I didn't actually look this up, but I'm like 99% sure that it would work this way. This sees the card you exile to cast it, right?
Yes.
Like when it leaves play, you get back your creature as well as theirs.
Yeah, that's the idea here. Like just both things, they both get abducted and they both get returned.
Yeah, the timing on that's weird because you're like, it's seeing itself before it enters play. So
I see. Like, yes, I think I might be wrong here. I'm no rules expert, but I think there was actually a recent rules update that allows a cast card to see the card it saw or something. Anyways, I don't have to get into that, but yeah, it works the way you think it does.
Yeah, otherwise they just wouldn't word it like that. But yeah. So if this thing gets counterspell, you just pack up your stuff and go home.
Yeah, I guess basically, yeah. That is not good.
It is a decent reanimate target.
Sure is, yeah.
It is like kind of interesting how like there's different. So if you cast it, you get the exile. If you reanimate it, you get the enters. If you manifest it, you just get a 5/5 flyer. So it's almost like three different versions of it.
I think the card is pretty good though. Like I imagine, best case scenario, of course, is you like sack something or exile something of your own that has a good end to the battlefield effect that you can reuse and get their best creature, and then it sticks around for a turn or two. If it gets answered, not the worst. You probably got in some damage, get your card back. The downside of this card is that you cast a 6 mana spell, or I guess the real downside is you just literally cannot cast this card. And that's the floor. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting variant to this kind of effect.
Yeah, I could see being really wrong about this. I think it all kind of washes out to a C for me.
I'm gonna go C+. I think it's a little bit better than that, but yeah, very, very unsure about that C+. This is another one I could see going other way. Next up, we've got that room I just mentioned, Surgical Suite. is one side, 1 and a white. When you unlock this door, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And Hospital Room, 3 and a white. Whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature.
Yeah, so these, I mean, we're going to read these all left to right, but I think you'll cast the right side of this one first more often than not.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a good
And
one.
like, just real, like, I think it's important to mention that just because people might start to auto process them as like, okay, I do this side, then I do this side, because it is cheaper, but you are pretty happy, I think, with like that 4 mana ability is very powerful.
Yeah, that's a good ability.
And that 2 mana ability is very powerful.
Card seems very strong to me. I'm a fan of this one. Yeah, I do
somewhere in the B range.
Right, I was gonna say I think it definitely gets to the B range, and I think a B minus most likely. I think it doesn't, like, you do need a few things to go right. You need to be in a position to attack. You need to, or have a 3-power creature in the grave. Like, these aren't giant hoops to jump through, but it's not just cast the card always going to do great things. So I think B minus, but yeah, I do like it.
I'll go up to a B for this.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
Part of the reason is just because on a lot of these rooms, like the other white room we talked about, you're like, yeah, it could be really good. Both cards were like really weak on their own, and both of these cards are not like that overcosted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's almost like you're getting almost your mana value worth on each side, and basically the first half you cast this, you're effectively like draw a card onto it. It's just a very specific card.
Yeah, no, I'll join you. You've convinced me. I also just like all the things that you got to keep at the back of your win for Mark. Everything you got to keep at the back of your head at these rooms, just enchantments mattering and triggering Uri and stuff. So yeah, I totally agree. I'll join you.
Okay.
And that's gonna do it for white. Okay, so any closing thoughts on white before we go to blue?
Yeah, white looks really powerful. There's a bunch of stuff we gave in the B grade, especially in the uncommons. And spoiler for tomorrow, white also has a bunch of busted rares.
Yep.
So I think white is, if it's not the best color in the set, I'd be surprised if it wasn't the second best color in the set.
There were very few cards where we were just like, out on this. Or even just like, this is probably just a D. Probably not many people going to play this. Like, there's just not very many cards in white like that.
Right, it's also super deep. Yeah, that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, no, totally agree. All right, going back to the cheap cards as we go to blue and going back to the commons. First one up, Enter the Enigma. Single blue mana for a sorcery. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card. Okay.
Yeah, there's a few of these can't be blocked texts, which most of them are in blue, and none of them are in survival colors, which is kind of interesting. So there's potential crossover there. This is a great way to trigger survival. But the fact that they've added these also, to me, maybe I'm overreading into this, but it's kind of a hint that in testing the games might have been kind of slow.
Interesting.
And they just had to add a bunch of ways to like push through at the end, because it does feel like there's just a whole chunk of blue cards that don't really fit anywhere that are designed to push damage. And I think it might be because there's a lot of haymakers in this set, and games can kind of grind out. So
yeah, it's not even generally a 1 mana draw a card. We'd be like, yes, this triggers all your spells things, but that doesn't exist in this set, right? It's a sorcery that goes to the graveyard. That's, I guess, something that you could say for Delirium.
Right, but not on turn 1.
Right, not on turn 1. You can't even cast it early. So it is a card we've seen before in a few sets, a functional reprint anyways, and yeah, it's a good blue aggressive card. Like a C+ in a blue aggressive deck, but you're just not going to be there all that often, I imagine.
Yeah, I still think I'm going to be fine playing this some amount of the time. I still think it's like a C.
Yeah, I'll join you. I guess here's the thing, right? It's a survival card. It's a blue-green survival card. How about that? Or a blue-white survival card.
Blue-white, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll give it a C too. Can only be so bad. Next up, Unable to Scream. This is a blue mana aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a toy artifact creature, base power and toughness 0-2 in addition to its other types. And as long as the enchanted creature is face down, it can't be turned face up.
So this, we've like, often these effects are more mana and not great. 1 mana is certainly more appealing, but we did have, what was it, Witness Protection in
Yep.
SNC?
Resurrection. Made a 1/1. That was worse than an O2 for us, like as the person who cast it.
Like you'd rather give them an O2, you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, you'd rather give them an O2.
Yeah, I kind of Witness Protection wasn't very good. I think it had pretty bad
It
stats.
did.
I'm a little higher on this, also because blue has quite a bit of draw spells.
Mm-hmm.
And when you want draw spells, the thing you need to be able to kind of get away with taking time off and drawing is like cheap ways to deal with creatures.
Yeah, and compared to Witness Protection, this is in a set that cares about enchantments in multiple ways.
Hmm.
It also, as SNC was not, even the blue decks in SNC were quite aggressive. So it's not like you really wanted this kind of effect very often. I do like this card quite a bit more. I would have given Witness Protection like a D. I think Unable to Scream probably is just a C. I would imagine as long as you're not attacking on the ground, it's in your defensive deck, it's good enough to play a copy or two of.
I'm gonna go to C minus,
Yeah.
but not too far off. I think it's just a little worse.
Yeah, cool. Next up, we've got Creeping Peeper. Really cool art here. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. Tap to add blue. Spend this mana only to cast an enchantment spell, unlock a door, or turn a permanent face up. It's funny, until right before this review, I thought this was a 1/3 because all the cards that are like this are 1/3s, but it's a 2/1.
What would you rather it be though? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I almost think a 2/1 so that you can trade off when you need to on turn 2 and not have their 2/2 survival creature be like, oh, I get it for free.
Yeah, so when I first saw this, I was like, wow, that's a lot of things, like enchantments,
Mm-hmm.
unlocking, like flipping manifest, like that's a lot of things that you can do. And then I kind of just realized like there have been like green, 1 and a green, 2/1 tap for green mana dorks that are like not even that good.
Right. Yeah,
Like a mana dork, it's just not, yeah, I'm just not interested in this.
no, I think so too. And this is something that I think is just becoming true about limited mana dorks is that they just need something more than I tapped had a color of mana, right? You need some additional bonus later in the game. And this is worse than those cards and doesn't have that. So yeah, I think this is not a great card. I don't think this is a successful variant of this kind of card. Actually, to give you a good example, the one good version of this card was from Lord of the Rings, like this kind of card, and that did
Mm.
have an additional ability on it. So yeah, I'm gonna
You
give
know,
Creeping Peeper. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
that also tapped to add any color for spells.
Yes, that is also
And
very
I
true.
think I would be interested in this if this added any color for those three things.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point, especially because you can splash some of the 2-color rooms potentially, right? Yeah, I'm just gonna give Creeping Peeper a D, maybe a D plus.
Yeah.
I'll give it the D plus, but
I'm gonna stick with the D.
all right, yeah, fair enough. Don't Make a Sound is up next. One in a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. And if they do pay that 2, you get to Surveil 2. 2, 2, 2, 2,
Quench.
2. Yeah, it's Quench. Quench with some upside, some minor upside.
Pretty minor, because like you really want to counter a spell. Like you're only gonna cast this as Surveil 2 if you're completely sure that it's not hitting anything.
Yeah, I think this kind of card, we've seen just a lot of this recently, and it ranges from slightly above playable to slightly above average, slightly below average. More of the time, it's slightly below average, and I think this is a slightly below average version of this. So, yeah, I would give this a D plus,
I'm a little higher than that.
C minus.
I'm gonna go C minus. Yeah, like
Yeah,
quenches are typically some of the top performing blue commons by stats in like pretty much any set we've seen recently. There's pros and cons to this version. Like part of the pros is that if I'm right about it being a haymaker set, people are going to be tapping out pretty late into the
for
game.
expensive spells. Yeah,
But the flip side to that is if you are holding up 1 and a blue, and your opponent kind of says what's up, they might have the option of just unlocking a door.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like
They could just say like, all
mana.
right, gonna
Yeah.
pay some mana, not casting a spell. I'm gonna stick with my D plus, I think, but
Okay.
yeah. Next up is Piranha Fly. 1 in a blue for a 2/1 flyer, but it enters tapped.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these just like random blue aggressive cards I was
Yeah,
talking about.
very
Like
strange.
there's no home for this.
Extremely vanilla too. Like, there's like no, they didn't give it an enchantment sometime. That it, no nothing. It's just like, hey, are you a blue deck that? I guess it's, hey, are you a blue deck that wants a 2-drop? And unfortunately, most blue decks are like, oh, I just need a 2. Like that sounds a little bit more like an aggressive, controlling deck than a aggressive deck. Because usually, if you're an aggressive deck, you prioritize those. And this isn't a particularly great blocker for multiple reasons.
The interesting thing is, so I am gonna give this a D,
Yeah.
and if this thing was an enchantment creature, I think it would go up to like a C plus.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think you. I wouldn't be surprised if your read is right, because like on the format, just they needed some more ways for blue to push damage. Because this isn't a card you just put in the card file. It's like, hey, we're designing this enchantment delirium set. Let's put a 2/1 vanilla kind of vanilla creature in. Like that. This is here for a specific design reason, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, yeah, there's so many ways. Like, it could just also not enter tapped. Like, Stormpunt Pegasus is not broken.
No, I'll give it a D
Anyways, yeah.
plus because it's a 2-drop that is playable. But
Okay.
yeah. Next up, we've got Stalked Researcher. A lot of the same things about this card, I suppose. Maybe a bit better. 2 mana, 1 in a blue for a 3/3 defender. Eerie. It can attack. As though it didn't have defender.
Yeah, I do like this one better.
Me
Like,
too.
this actually holds off survivors
Mhm.
and, the red-white stuff. And I think this, if you want it to attack, I don't think it'll be that hard to be able to make this attack.
Yeah, so it's a okay card for both an aggressive blue-white deck and a more controlling blue-white, or a controlling blue deck. The thing about often it's the problem with these kind of cards, or like, you can imagine like, oh, in a deck that's really good for, it can attack pretty much every turn. A lot of the times though, that restricts you on what your 3-drop is. Like, you might want to play a certain 3-drop, but that's not an enchantment, which means this can't attack, so you're like giving up something somewhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would give Stock Researcher a C minus, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, cool,
That's what I wrote too. Yeah.
nice. Erratic Apparition. This is 3 mana, 2 in a blue, for a 1/3 flying with vigilance. And Eerie, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn.
So small on
Yeah.
defense.
Yeah, really.
Like, vigilance is nice, but you're not really holding anything back on the blocking side of things.
Yeah, it can deal like a big burst of damage in one turn, maybe. Maybe
But at that
this
point,
has,
why aren't you just playing the Piranha Fly?
yeah. This is like a 23rd card in a blue-white deck, basically, right?
Yeah, that's being a little generous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want to get to D minus?
I was gonna just give it a D.
Okay.
I mean, go all the way down to D minus if you want.
Yeah. No, I think D sounds right to me too.
Right.
This one's not a D minus though. Tunnel Surveyor. This is 2 in a blue for a 2/2. When it enters, you make a 1/1 Glimmer enchantment creature token.
I want to hear your grade on this before I give one.
Yeah, so I think this card is good, not amazing. It is all the things we like about, or it is definitely something we like. Something we like about it is that it is a token-making creature. It makes multiple bodies, and enchantment matters too. But it's not like that much more than that. Like, a lot of cards like this have the creature has flying or haste or it's a little something. I think this means that I like the card, but I don't love it. I was gonna give it a C plus.
Yeah, I am 100% on board with everything you said.
Great.
I think it's nice in blue-white because it's the Glimmer, the enchantment creature is triggering there. But aside from blue-white, like, it's not even clear that any of the other decks really want it because this isn't a good thing to manifest dread. It's blue-black probably, like it's going to control, it's going to 2 blockers, whatever, but definitely not anywhere near the power we've seen on like 3 mana body plus body.
Preening champion? Yeah, this is not a preening champion.
Not even close.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think C plus is pretty appropriate. I could see this coming up a little bit, and we're underrating it a little bit, but yeah, I don't want to just be like, yeah, great card because it makes multiple bodies, even though that is something we know we like about cards when we're evaluating them. Next up is Twist Reality. This is 1 blue for an instant. It's got 2 options. Choose one of them. Either counter target spell or Manifest Dread.
I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this one too, because maybe we'll disagree on this one.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting one. So I think, big picture, I think I like this card. So Cancel is one of those type of cards that you only need a little bit of a bonus on it to make it pretty good, like a Surveil or Initial Mode. When it's the best of the best, it's something like the Trickery from Lord of the Rings. You amass one and you counter, like, that card is great. This isn't going to be ever that close to that card because you don't get both. But I do think that the split card of I can, on turn 3, I can counter their 3 or make a 2/2, Manifest Dread, that is, which is better than a 2/2. Or late game, you're not going to Manifest Dread with this generally, but you are going to just hold this and be like, yep, I'm just going to hold this for their important spell. So that's a really, really nice split. Because the downside of the counterspell generally is they don't cast anything on turn 3, which isn't that likely, but maybe it's not something you really care about countering. And you're just like, I wish this was some other card. Or I wish I cast my 3-drop. So I think this card's pretty good. I'm a fan. How about you?
I unfortunately agree with everything you said again.
Trying to trick me.
Spellgyre is a card that had pretty good top player stats in Bloomburrow, and I think part of the reason is it had the same thing where it's a split of a counter and in that case a draw spell. And players, like, if you're good at evaluating board states and what's important at the time, you kind of pass the turn knowing that the thing you want to do with Spellgyre is draw 2, scry 2, but you have like an emergency valve if you need to not do it. I almost think this is like the opposite. The default on this is going to be I pass the turn wanting to use the counterspell side, but if the opponent does nothing, I'm more than happy just spending my mana to impact the board and make sure that I'm not, falling behind by skipping a turn completely.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, no, I'm glad we were kind of aligned on this side, because it is a little bit tricky to evaluate, because sometimes these counter spells with upside aren't actually, the upside doesn't actually matter too much. What do you want to give it, though? I'll give my grade first, because once again, I've been giving you a lot of what do you want to give it, so I'm going to give it a C+. I think your blue decks are just going to play this card.
Yeah, I was somewhere between C and C+, and I think C+ is, we'll call it a bit of a hot take, but I'll join you there.
All right, sweet. Clammy Prowler. Great name. 3 and a blue for a 2/5 enchantment creature. When it attacks, another target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. Yeah, it's a 2-power 4-drop. Like, it's an aggressive 4-drop. Or, sorry, it's a 4-drop that wants to go in an aggressive deck. And it's only providing 2 power. Even though it makes something else unblockable, I don't think that quite makes up for being a 2-power attacker.
Like, even if this thing could target itself, it wouldn't be that great.
Yeah, not a huge fan, even though it's an enchantment creature. I think Clammy Prowler is like a D+.
Yeah, I would, just because it's an enchantment, I'll give it the plus as well.
Yeah, exactly. Clammy Prowler. Clammy Prowler. It's a little bit hard to say. Say that 5 times fast. Glimmer Burst. This is a really cool card. 3 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards, and then create a 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature token.
Yeah, there's kind of like a little mini draw-go package here in blue between the cancel, this card, and this card.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is really good. Like, forget the fact that this triggers Eerie. This is just like a good card straight up.
Yeah, because if you want to break it down into, the functional modes this card has, you can see it as 2 mana or 4 mana, draw 2, and trigger your Eerie, or gain 3 life or whatever. You chump block with the 1/1, or that 1/1 starts attacking. Like, it just does so much. I think, if you just see this as 4 mana, draw 2, gain 3 on average, like that's a really good controlling card.
Yeah, like, I think this would be playable as a sorcery, and that's like saying a lot. Instant leaving up 4 mana, your opponent has to respect other cards too, and then you just like totally punish them by drawing cards. Yeah, very, very into this. I think this is a B-.
Yep, I was gonna go B- as well. It's really pushed. All right, next up we've got Vanish from Sight. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an instant. Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library, and you surveil 1. Okay, that's a nice little tack on to this kind of card that we see very often at this point.
Yeah, I like this card if the set's going to have a lot of Manifest Dread, because you want something that punishes your opponent for flipping their thing up and spending a ton of mana,
Yeah.
and this does that very effectively.
Yeah, I really like it. A C?
I'm going to go C+.
Plus?
For
Yeah,
this.
no, as soon as I said C, I was like, ooh, that's a little too low. Yep, I agree. C+ for Vanish.
Okay.
Next up, we've got a common room, one of Blue's 2 common rooms. Underwater Tunnel is the first one here. Single blue mana. When you unlock this door, Surveil 2. And Slimy Aquarium, 3 and a blue. When you unlock this door, Manifest Dread, then put a +1/+1 counter on that creature.
I should maybe get you to go first, but I'll put it out there. I love the design on this card.
Yeah, it's sweet. Yeah. Why don't you talk this one up a little bit?
So the flexibility of this, like this does deceptively more than it looks like, because a lot of times you're just going to play this on turn 1 to surveil 2, and that could be, hey, I need a color that I'm missing, or I need my next land drop, and I'm just going to find that, or I need a 2-drop to make sure I impact the board. Or it could just be, hey, my hand's perfect, I'm going to mill 2 cards and go like a lot of the way towards Delirium. But you can also save this to later. So like the second mode is, okay, on turn 4, I Manifest Dread and make a 3/3, which is like understated, but it's basically 4 mana 3/3, draw a card, which is pretty good. And then at that point late in the game, I get this Surveil 2 option where I get to scry away lands or surveil away lands and guarantee that I'm drawing gas. And then you have the third mode of this, which is where you cast both halves either together, or you cast the tunnel the turn before you cast the aquarium, and you can set up your manifest to make sure you're hitting something that's going to like impact, like from a creature perspective with the counter, whether that's a flyer, whether that's a big creature, whether that's a survivor. There can be a lot of ways that you can get a lot of juice out of this card.
Yeah, it digs a lot of cards deep too. Like, say you do have some pretty nasty cards to dig to, like it digs 4 cards deep at the end of the day. Yeah, I this is one that I looked at, and I kind of was unimpressed until I thought about it a little bit more. Like, I thought this was like a very filler. It's, it's a fine room card, but I think it's just a card every blue deck's gonna play.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the B range for this, but I think this is like a C+.
I agree. Completely agree. C+ for Underwater Tunnel, Slimy Aquarium. Next up, we've got the Land Cycler for blue, Daggermaw Megalodon. 4 blue for a 5/7 Vigilance and Island Cycling 2 mana.
Yeah, so I talked about this with the white one. I think blue, especially with its draw go package, like leaving up the 2 mana for Island Cycling is even less punishing. I'm pretty happy with this thing. Like, it's not even that bad of a 6-drop.
No, I thought this cost 7 when I looked, like, before. My eyes generally, when I read cards, they actually read text box then mana cost, and I was like, okay, this is gonna cost 7. Oh no, it cost 6. Wow, that was surprising. Yeah, I like it. Same thing as the white one, I think, just to see.
I will maybe go on a hot take C+ for the Megalodon.
Okay. Next up, we've got the other common room, Meat Locker. This is the first side here. 2 and a blue. When you unlock this door, tap up to 1 target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. And Drowned Diner, 3 blue. When you unlock this door, draw 3 cards and discard a card.
Yeah, so normally these stun cards are kind of bad because they put you down on cards, and normally, draw spells are risky because
Yeah.
you can be behind on the board, and this kind of fixes it. Like, these designs are just super elegant. I really like them.
Yeah, a lot of these room cards, they ask a question that I think is very skill testing, which is this game about tempo or is it about cards, right? Because a lot of them give you this kind of option. This one, is a very good example, but it's like, do you need to catch up on tempo, or are you about value? And you cast whichever one first that you think is true. So power level wise, I think this card is actually not amazing or anything. Like, it's not a draw 3, and the stun mode is a little bit slow, so probably a little more of a room card than not, or just like a specific kind of deck card than like the last blue room we saw. That one just goes in any deck, I think. This one's a little bit worse than that.
Okay. So I don't think you're playing this in blue green, but
Mm-mm.
wouldn't you play it in all three other pairs?
So definitely blue red. Blue white. I could. I think you're probably not going to play this as much in blue white, just because. Yes, the tap mode is nice, and the draw mode is like a nice kind of mana sink. But I think most of your blue white decks are going to be looking to end the game
It
rather than
is
prolong
two
them.
eerie triggers, and like if you're aggressive, the stun counters can basically be hard removal. Like if the game's ending in 2 or 3 turns,
Mm-hmm.
then the untap doesn't matter.
Yeah, and then if it does, like, it's always like a kind of a gambit when you're playing that kind of stun their thing card. It's like, because if they do get to untap, it's just a disaster. I guess it's not as much as a disaster here because you're just like, okay, well, I've just got to draw to attach. So yeah, no, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just too low on it. What were you gonna give it? Were you gonna give it a C plus or?
I was gonna go C.
Okay, yeah. I think that's where I was gonna land too. I was kind of between C minus and C, but I'll join you there. Sounds about right. All right, that will bring us to the uncommons now. Starting with Scrabbling Skullclaw, single blue mana for a 0/3. And it's a crab skeleton. And I say crab because it calls back to a lot of other 1 mana crabs. Eerie, whenever an enchantment you control enters or whenever you fully unlock a room, target player mills 2 cards.
I am not interested in this. Are
Yeah.
you gonna try and talk me up on it or no?
No, I don't think so. So there was actually a card that was incredibly similar in Theros Beyond Death. It was an 0/2, and obviously didn't care about rooms, but that card was nigh unplayable. It just like the rate that you milled them was not quick enough, basically. And I think the same goes here, especially because I mean this was also true in Theros, but milling your opponent is just bad in this set. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to give them delirium. You don't want to put things in the graveyard with flashback or come back from the graveyard. Like I think this is not a card you should put in your deck unless if you get like 3 of them somehow. I can see building a deck around it. But it's not just a card you're ever just gonna want to throw in your deck.
If you get like 3 of them and a couple pyroclasms, then you're cooking.
Yeah, sure. I can see this as a once every 50 drafts kind of card.
Yeah, so we're gonna give this like are you going to D plus? I think I'm gonna go D on this.
Before we get to a grade, I do want to address there's some people saying mill yourself. That's much more of a constructed thing, I think, where you're like I think very, very, very rarely and limited do, even when there are graveyard mechanics, cards that are just dedicated to milling yourself actually come to fruition to be good enough. Because like sure, you get to turbo enable delirium, but a lot of your cards are just going to get you there anyways while not playing this card. Like you just play a better card basically. So like I get the idea, but I also don't think that's like I don't think we're missing the joke on the card basically. I don't think that's a good use of the card.
Yeah, I think it's really good to mention that. I also had just like dismissed the idea of milling yourself because I think it's not good enough, but you're right, it is very good to explicitly mention that.
Yep. So what do you want to give it?
I'm gonna go D.
Yep. I'm into that too. Next up, we've got
Okay.
Fear of Isolation. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/3. It's an enchantment creature. It's got flying. And it says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. So it's a overstated 2 mana card, 2 mana 2/3, but you gotta pick something up.
Yeah, another cast trigger, so another thing that could, counter spells looking even better. Notably with this, often these cards. Well, let's talk about the normal stuff first,
Sure.
right? You can pick up a value creature and redo that. You can pick up a land, especially if you haven't got your land drop for the turn. You can just have this essentially cost 1 mana. All those still apply. The thing that's really nice about this is you can also pick up a removal spell in a lot of cases. Because if you've like played a room that's like a damage-based room, and pick up your room, there has never really been a comp for that where you get to rebuy. Like effectively, you're not losing any tempo because
Mm-hmm.
often the issues with this is that you're going behind on tempo to pick up something to provide value.
Yeah, there's a card we're going to get to in a few minutes when we get to black that's great to pick up that I have in mind. And picking up rooms, yeah, you can, after you pick up maybe your manifest dread cards, like a land, if you manifest the land, you're like, okay, I actually want that land. Yeah, I think there's just like enough little great things about this card. Also, if you're falling behind on tempo, sometimes it's not the worst just to like pick up your land drop. If like, not that it's a common mode, but sometimes you're like, guys, want to get this and play to block their 2/2s. Sometimes you do that. So yeah, it's a cool little card. I think it's probably about a C+.
I wrote down C+ as well.
Yeah, cool. Next up, we've got Flood Pit Drowner. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Flash Vigilance. When it enters, tap target creature and opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. 2 mana, tap it. 1 and a blue, tap it. Shuffle the Drowner and target creature with the stun counter on it into their owner's library. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few things with stun counters, because there's the blue room we saw. There's actually another. Well, there's a blue thing that makes it not untap coming up, and then there's like the white common that we saw. One thing we didn't mention, which is notable, is that you do not want to be putting stun counters on your opponent's survival creatures.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a very good point.
That being said, both because I think survival creatures are probably not that common and maybe one of the slightly worse decks, but this card is really good.
Yeah, so pushed.
There's a lot of, like, this card also has a lot of modes, right? You can either just play it on 2 and start beating. You can just use it for the ETB ability where you're tapping something and locking it. Like, you're basically having a opposing creature miss 2 combats because you tap it pre-combat and then they have a stun counter and miss the second combat.
Yeah.
You can use it as a hard removal spell that also like pings your opponent for 2 damage because it's got vigilance. This card is really good and quite flexible too.
Yeah, it's really, really strong. It's often you see cards that are flexible, or powerful, and this is just both. Like this is kind of hybrid cake you needed too. I don't think it's so powerful that it's like, wow, B+ A- range, but I just give it a B.
I wrote down B as well.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, great card. Next up is Get Out. Blue for an instant. Choose one, either counter target creature or enchantment spell. Hey, that set has a lot of those things. Or return 1 or 2 target creatures and or enchantments you control to your hand. Very strange.
You own. Not even you control. You own.
Oh, sorry, you own. You own. So if your opponent steals them, you can... Yeah, very engineered wording there.
There is upside and downside, right? Because if you are playing this with, like, the Act of Treason, you can't, like, also make them replay it.
Yep, sure.
But yeah, I think normally you'll be casting this for the first side, but that second side is a nice buyout.
Yeah, I think so too. And just like 2 mana counter a creature or an enchantment, it's gonna be a lot of things you care about. Blue is tough, right? You got to make sure you're in a deck that can cast that. We're talking 10 blue sources generally to cast it on turn 2, which is generally where you want to have your 2 mana counter a creature spell available. But if you're there, which I'm gonna kind of put the I'm gonna assume you are there. I think this is like a C+.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah. Next up, we got Paranormal Analyst. That blue-green deck we were talking about that didn't really have very many good cards. We haven't seen any good blue-green cards yet. Here's one that probably isn't very good either. So this is 1 and a blue for a 1/3. And it says, whenever you manifest Dread, put a card you put into the graveyard this way into your hand. Okay.
Oh, God.
That's a heck of a build-around. It's
not even a build-around.
Yeah,
it's just...
Exactly.
You get rewarded for doing something you already want to do. This card's amazing.
Yeah, just like everybody in chat, just like the wheels turning. Wait, that just says draw a card, basically. Yeah, this card's very good.
You do need to like cast Manifest Dread after casting this, so like not going to be a great top deck. Like there's some asterisks there, but this card's like a B at least.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a B. It seems like definitely what you just said. There's some downside, but I think the upside outweighs it. Next up, we've got Stay Hidden, Stay Silent. 1 and a blue for an aura. Enchant creature. When Stay Hidden, Stay Silent enters, tap enchanted creature. The enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And you pay 6 mana, 4 blue. Shuffle the enchanted creature into its owner's library, and then Manifest Dread. Activate only as a sorcery. So you got a 2 mana, lock down your creature, doesn't untap. That's a decent rate. And then a mana sink later to either get the problematic thing off the board if you need to, or just make a 2/2.
And I'm sure there will be at least once in this set where it'll be correct to target your own survival creature.
And tap it down just to get the abilities, yeah.
Every turn you get that free survival trigger.
Yeah. So. Yeah, this is good blue removal. I think this is good.
Yeah, that last ability is nice on having the buyout for exile. Like if the creature has some passive ability that's bothering you, you get rid of it and you get to manifest dread. I like this.
Yeah. Are we probably not B minusing? I think we're probably just C plusing on
No.
this one.
Yeah, I think C plus
Okay.
is a good grade.
Nice. Next up, we've got Cursed Windbreaker. And yeah, it's at Windbreaker like a coat. 2 to blue for an equipment. It says, when it enters Manifest Dread, then attach the Windbreaker to that creature. The equipped creature has flying, and the equip cost is 3. Interesting.
I like was the Hex Gold Hover Wings or whatever it was.
Yep.
Yeah, that card was really good, and this card I think is equally good.
Yeah, like you manifest I don't know, 4 power creature, a survival creature is really good to manifest with this thing because it gives it evasion to keep getting in. That equip cost of 3 is not something you're going to do every turn, but it's just nice to have. Yeah, I think this card's quite good. I think this one does make it to the B range.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Like this, giving yourself a free kite sail or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like just something that gives your creatures flying, like they cannot ignore the creature, and then they can also not ignore the equipment.
Yep. It's also very good for Delirium. Like, it's an artifact that, mind you, won't go to the graveyard on its own a lot, but helps. Anything with Manifest Dread helps.
Yeah. So are you in the B minus?
I think B minus still. Yeah, but
Somewhere between B minus and a B for me. So I think yeah, B minus sounds fair.
yep. Next up is Fear of Imposters. This is 1 blue blue for an enchantment creature. It's a 3/2 with flash, and it says when it enters, counter target spell, its controller manifests dread. So you're saying making your opponent manifest dread is not good, but it's probably going to be better than whatever spell they cast.
Well, you not on curve, right? Like
You think it's going to be a better?
letting them manifest dread is going to be we'll call it 3 mana worth of stuff for them.
Yeah, I
So
think
like
that's
if
about right.
you're
I
hitting
think
your
you're right.
3 drop, if you're hitting their 3 drop, I don't think it's good enough. Like a 1 blue 3/2 flash that cycles their creature kind of, yeah, not that interested.
I
So you
think
really
you're
need to be hitting something more expensive.
I think you're probably coming out ever so slightly ahead on that. Like I think
They also get selection, like the
yeah.
Manifesting Dread is I'm pretty low on this, but I don't think it's unplayable.
Wow. Those are some strong words. Pretty low but not unplayable. I think this card's quite good.
Okay.
Huh. Yeah, I just like I said, I think you're getting a minor advantage when you counter something on 3. And I think on 5 or something it's just great. Well, okay, there's some people in chat that I respect. Jason and Danelius also not being too high on the card. So maybe I'm just too high on it. Interesting.
Well, we gotta lock in your grade first.
Yeah, I was gonna give this a B minus, which is incredibly high now that we're talking through this. So
Okay.
okay, so let me just break down a little bit from your side. Like, you think that it is not good to counter something on turn 3 with this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I might just be thinking about this wrong.
I was gonna give it a D plus. Like you can go. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before.
I'm gonna give it a higher grade. Like, I think I have come down a little bit on it because I think some of the points you've made are right, but I'm gonna give it a C plus still, and I so could be wrong about this. But it's great to have something that is so wide of a difference. Usually we're pretty in step here, but
Okay.
yeah, be fun to come back to this one. Next up, we've got Unnerving Grasp. This one, I don't think I have to sell you on. This is 3 to blue for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Manifest Dread. So we've got a pretty much upgraded Mana War for a lot of reasons.
Ropkin.
Yeah. So it's a sorcery. It means it goes to the graveyard, which is good. We like that. Manifest Dread. Great. You target your own stuff, which I can easily see them not letting you do that with this card. Like, you can bounce your own stuff. Bounce the rooms to reuse them. Bounce whatever.
And it's not even creature, it's just an online permanent.
Yeah, this card's fantastic.
This card's like at least a B plus.
Yeah, I was gonna go B plus. I could see it getting the A range, but I'll give it a B plus.
Yeah.
Nice. Unwilling Vessel is up next. 2 and a blue for a 3/2 vigilance. It's got Eerie. You put a possession counter on it when you trigger Eerie, and when the vessel dies, you make an XX blue spirit creature token with flying where X is the number of counters on Unwilling Vessel.
Yeah, this is kind of got that thing where you don't really want to get into combat with it on curve.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also like not like that great if you wait multiple turns. Like at least Mind Whisker was extremely powerful if you kept it out of combat. This is just like okay if you keep it out of combat.
Yeah, agree. Like it's okay. It's definitely playable.
Yeah, I was
like-
gonna go like C minus.
C minus, yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I could even see this being like a D plus, honestly. Like just kind of junky.
Well, like 3/2 that dies into a 1/1 flyer. 3/2 vigilance, got a
Yep.
keyword with a thing that dies into a 1/1 flyer you'd play.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be times that you get more than one counter. So yeah, I think it's in the C range.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna stick with my minus.
Yep. I'll join you there. Next up is Ghostly Keybearer. This is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, all right, what's our big payoff here? You unlock a door of a locked door you have from a room.
Like you're really setting up the wording to see like this is so unimpressive. But that's potentially a pretty big swing.
I mean, I think so, because like I'm not happy about 4 mana 3/3 flyer. Are you?
B no, but like it's also not unplayable. Like I'd prefer a well, no, I cut myself off. I'm not gonna say it. But yeah, I think a 3/3 flyer for 4 is like we kind of talk a bit about some set reviewers that were super high on them, but they're certainly not unplayable.
No, I agree. But even like some of the better ones we've seen, like Cold Case Cracker, that ended up being like I would say slightly below average playable. And that was
Well, yeah, I was reasonably happy with Cold
okay,
Case
yeah,
Cracker,
maybe on average playable. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Anyways, point being, I think that the upside in this card is not worth playing a 4 mana no ETB creature. That's my feeling.
All right. Well, okay. I was gonna give this a C minus. You think it goes down to the D range?
Yeah, I was gonna give it a D plus.
All right. I'll stick with my C minus just to keep us apart a little bit.
So yeah, let me just maybe push you a little bit in the direction that I'm feeling. If your opponent has, if you have spent one of your early turns, either turn 2 or turn 3, casting a room, that means your opponent has spent their turn developing their board, play a 2, play a 3. They're going to have a removal spell lined up for this thing, almost certainly, right? They're not going to have gotten a blocker out of the way most of the time. You're not going to have played a different threat. You played a room. I mean, they both could be true. But
yeah, the thing I think is more likely to happen is you play to the board on the turns 2, 3, and 4, including this,
Mhm.
and
then you play a room after and you trigger it immediately is the idea?
well, if they don't kill this, a lot of the rooms allow this to get in through whatever their blocker is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also immediately get the other side of the room too. That could be like a 4 or 5 mana boost on turn 5.
Yeah, and maybe I should rate a little bit higher, just going on averages of the times when you do the thing, it will be great. Like I don't want to look at that and be like, whatever, you're gonna do it 5% of the time. No, you're gonna do it sometimes, it's gonna be great. So maybe that deserves the bump up to the low C range.
Like most rooms have a side that costs at least 4 mana.
Yeah.
And if you ever get 4 mana out of this on a trigger, like you're probably winning that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be hot take as a D plus, but I'm gonna keep this as D plus.
Sure. Yeah. We're still only one grade apart.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah.
Next up, we got Fear of Failed Test. This is 4 and a blue for a 2/7 enchantment creature. When it deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards.
Notably, this card and the last card also very good to Manifest Dread.
Yes, yes, indeed. That's a good point. That's a good point. So 2/7's big. 2/7 is a large butt. Doesn't get killed by red's removal, a lot of greens removal.
It's also best friends with the 1 mana unblockable trick.
Yeah, draw 3. It would just turn into Ancestral Recall. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I do think this is still all those things I was talking about, where it's a 5 mana, no ETB, no protection. But it's going to be warping when it comes down. Like, I was listening to Lords Limited, their preview episode. I think Ben put it pretty nicely, where it's like, this isn't a great card, but it will be game warping when it comes down. Your opponent's going to be like, I have to spend the turn killing this, or I have to dance around this a little bit.
Well, also you say no protection, but the protection is the number on the bottom
Yeah,
right.
that is some protection. Sure.
That's a lot of toughness.
It is. I agree. I like this card more than the last card.
I like this a similar amount because I was also going to give this a C-.
Okay, I'll give it a C- then.
Okay.
Fear of Falling is up next. 3 blue for a 4/4 flying enchantment creature. When it attacks, target creature defending player controls gets -2/-2, and loses flying until your next turn.
-2, -0.
Sorry,
-2,
wow.
-2 would be broken.
We're busted. Yeah. -2, -0 until your next turn, and loses flying.
Yeah, it is until your next turn though, so it does. Their attacks are also going to be impacted by this. Another no ETB 5-drop though.
Yeah.
You like this better or worse than the last card?
I think exactly the same. I think that this is also just C-.
Yep, I'm with you.
Cool. All right, and we've got another room here. Bottomless Pit, single blue mana. When you unlock this door, return up to 1 target creature to its owner's hand. Very nice. And Locker Room, 5 mana, 4 and a blue. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
Bottomless Pool, but you're reading a lot of cards.
Did I say Pit?
That's okay.
Pool.
But yeah, this I like this one too. I like most of these rooms. That's Unsummoned Sorcery Speed is a card that is not unplayable on its own, although it's pretty bad. But you combine it with your other half of your adventure, and this card becomes very good.
Yeah, it's great to play. Like, you're gonna draw the locker room. Sometimes you're gonna play the locker room and be like, okay, this is the best use of my mana this turn. And then your opponent, you've got this unsummoned just kind of looming, just like your opponent's like, man, I really don't want to play this like 6 mana, no ETB or whatever creature. Yeah, really cool. I like this card. You want to give this a C+?
I was wondering if this makes it into the B- range.
Me too. I could see it. I like that 1 mana enchantment bounce spell. Like that is good.
Well, just casting, there'll be times when you want to surprise them and start with Locker Room to get your card, and then you catch up on tempo.
Yep.
But if you just cast the Unsummon, your opponent really needs to worry. Like, they need to leave back blockers every single turn. Otherwise, you can just be like, yeah, okay, 5 mana, draw a card, and now I have this for perpetually going forward type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, like one thing that I'm sure we'll talk about at the end of the review, but quickly, these cards have a lot of play to them. Like, you can play these cards in a lot of different ways. Really, really cool. I think the gameplay is going to be really good for this set. But I'm going to give this, I'll join you. I'll give this the B-. I think it probably gets there between C+ B-. I'm not sure exactly where, but got enough going on. Next up, Duskmourn's Domination. This is 4 blue for an aura. Enchant creature. You control the enchanted creature, but it gets -3, -0, and loses all abilities. That's, not mind control, certainly, but still pretty good.
Well, okay, what do you want to give this?
I'm gonna give this a B-.
Okay, I am way lower on this thing.
Wow, way lower. Okay.
There's some bounce, which is always a risk with mind controls.
Indeed.
There's a number of disenchants that are usually like 2 to 4 mana. Indeed. That are gonna blow this out. But then even if you get the thing, you're basically turning the creature into like a little speed bump. like -3, -0, and losing all abilities
Yeah.
is really
No, no,
painful.
no. You're right. You're right. You're right. Like, what are you taking that? Like, I don't know if I could think off the top of my head, like, this is a really good thing to take with this, or is it like a fine thing to take with this still? Because it has to be a huge creature. Yeah, it has to be a huge creature. That's it.
Like,
Otherwise, like you said,
what
it's just a road bump. No, let's bump it down. I will change my grade immediately. I didn't actually hear your grade. Did you
I
say your
didn't give
grade?
it one yet. I was
Okay.
going to give you one more point of comparison, though. I
Oh,
think it's
okay.
called Rise of the Serpent or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. The make a 1/1 killer creature.
Yeah, 4 black, kill a creature, make a 1/1. Like, this is pretty close to that.
Yeah, you're right. Wow. Okay. Totally. Yeah, I think this is a. Gonna give it a D plus then. Is that too
I
low?
No, I was between D plus and C minus, and I think D plus is probably where I was going to land. I'm with you there.
Yeah, this is probably gonna trick a lot of players because it tricked me at first glance. So I imagine people are gonna be a little bit. Some people are gonna be a little bit high on this. All right, that's blue. Thoughts on blue?
Blue also seems powerful. I'm really interested in the instant package. I wouldn't be surprised if some greener players newer to the game struggle to make blue tick.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not as good as white because there's a lot of fillery cards like C minus, D plus, D type of stuff, including all the aggro cards.
Yep.
So I think it's pretty clear that white's better than blue, but I still think blue's pretty decent.
Yeah. So do I. I think that there's still a little bit of that awkwardness you see in blue sometimes with there's some aggressive cards, some defensive cards, but not as pronounced as I think we've seen in some other sets. I think the cards really do play well together, and I think they're doing a good job. I've been patting R&D in the back on the back of this set review, but I think they're doing a really good job of honing the blues. What blue does in limited, because it's been some rockiness in the past sometimes.